The rain didn't start heavy. It built slowly. A quiet, steady fall that turned the driveway slick and the air cold enough to settle into your bones before you even noticed it. I stood on the porch, barefoot, holding nothing but my purse. And my husband was already done with me. "It's just business," Mark said, his tone flat, detached, like he was explaining a routine decision instead of ending 10 years of my life.
He didn't look at me.
That was the first thing I noticed. Not anger, not guilt, just absence. Behind him, his sister leaned casually against the hallway wall, arms folded, a small smile sitting comfortably on her face, like she had been waiting for this moment. She was already wearing my robe, my silk robe, the one I had bought on a trip he never had time to join me on, the one that still smelled like my perfume. "It's just business?" I repeated. My voice didn't match the storm building around me. It stayed calm.
Too calm.
"She lost everything in her divorce," he said, finally stepping back toward the door. "She needs stability." "And I don't," I asked. He exhaled slightly, like the question itself was inconvenient. "You don't have a real job," he replied. "You're optional." Optional. That word landed harder than anything else, because it wasn't emotional. It was calculated, like I had been reviewed and removed. "You're locking me out?" I asked. "I already changed the codes," he said. "Your things are outside." He nodded toward the end of the driveway. I turned. Trash bags.
Black. Soaked.
Tied tight like whatever was inside them didn't matter anymore. My clothes. My life. Reduced to something disposable. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he added. Then he stepped back, closed the door, and the deadbolt clicked. A clean sound. Final. Like a decision that couldn't be undone. I stood there for a moment, not moving, not reacting, just listening.
To the rain.
To the silence behind the door. To the version of my life that had just been shut out. They thought it was over. That was the interesting part. They thought they were in control. I walked down the driveway slowly, the rain soaking through everything, the cold settling deeper with every step. The trash bags sat there, heavy, pathetic, almost unreal. I didn't open them, didn't check, because none of that mattered. Not anymore. I reached my car, unlocked it, and sat inside. Closed the door. Silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't exist outside. My hands rested on the steering wheel for a second longer than necessary. Then I reached into the passenger seat, pulled my laptop toward me, and opened it. The screen lit up instantly.
Familiar.
Controlled. Unlike everything else that had just happened. I entered the password.
Paused.
Then opened a file. One that hadn't been touched in months. Not because it wasn't important. Because it didn't need to be. It was already complete. Encrypted. Layered. Structured in a way that didn't leave room for interpretation. Ownership. Debt acquisition. Transfer authority. Everything tied together under one name. Not his.
Meaning.
Mark believed this house was his. That it had always been his. A family legacy passed down. Secured. Protected. What he didn't know was that legacy had almost collapsed years ago. And when it did, I was the one who stepped in. Quietly. Completely. He never asked how the foreclosure notices stopped. Never questioned how the bank backed off. Never looked deeper than the version of the story he was given. Because from his perspective, everything just worked. That was his mistake. I closed the laptop slowly, looked back at the house. The lights still on. Shadows moving behind the curtains. Her shadow. In my space. Wearing my things. Living in something she didn't understand. Because neither of them did. Not yet. I started the car, pulled away, and didn't look back. Because some moments aren't for reaction. They're for timing. I didn't rush back. That was the first thing that would have confused them if they had thought about me at all. People expect a reaction.
Calls.
Messages. Pleading. Anger. Something loud enough to make them feel justified. I gave them none of that. For 2 days, I stayed completely silent. No contact. No presence. No sign that I even existed. Because control isn't about showing up immediately. It's about showing up correctly. The paperwork had already been prepared years ago. That was the part they never understood. Mark thought the house was a legacy, a gift, something handed down, secure and unquestionable. What he didn't know was that it had almost been taken away long before he ever had the chance to lose it himself. His grandfather had been deep in private debt, not public, not something that would show up in obvious records. The kind of debt that gets handled quietly or not at all. And when the bank prepared to step in, I stepped in first, not as myself, not visibly, but through a holding company I had built years earlier.
Carefully.
Quietly, structurally, I bought the debt, every piece of it, not to save him, not to protect the family, but to control the outcome. And control changes everything. The deed was transferred shortly after, not into his name, not back into the family, into mine, legally, completely, irreversibly. But I never said anything, because ownership doesn't need attention. It needs patience. Monday morning, I made the call.
Short. Direct.
I'm ready to execute, I said. There was no hesitation on the other end, because everything had already been reviewed, approved, finalized. Understood, the voice replied. That was all. By midday, everything was in motion. Not loudly, not dramatically, but effectively. The kind of process that doesn't create noise. It creates outcomes. I arrived at the house just after 3. Not alone. 2 moving trucks parked along the curb. A legal team standing near the entrance. And the sheriff. That was the part that changes everything. Not emotion. Not argument. Authority. Mark opened the door before anyone knocked. Annoyed. Impatient. Still certain. I told you to stay away, he said, stepping forward. Then he saw the uniform, and everything shifted. What is this? He asked. The sheriff didn't respond immediately. He simply handed him the documents.
Clear.
Official. Final. You've been served, the sheriff said. This property is no longer under your control.
Silence.
Not confusion.
Not yet.
Just interruption. That's not possible, Mark said. It always starts there. Denial. Because belief doesn't disappear instantly. It fractures.
Slowly. Piece by piece.
It is, the sheriff replied calmly. Mark looked down at the papers. Then again. Longer this time. Because now, the structure was visible. This doesn't make sense, he said. I stepped forward. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just present. It does, I said. He looked at me. Really looked at me.
For the first time in a long time.
What did you do? He asked. The question came out quieter than anything he had said before. Not confident. Not controlled. Just uncertain. I corrected something, I replied. Another pause. Because now, he was starting to understand. You don't own this house, I continued. His grip tightened on the papers. That's not, he started. It is, I said. And this time, he couldn't finish, because the words didn't exist anymore. Behind him, his sister appeared, still wearing that same robe.
My robe.
What's going on? She demanded. No one answered her, because she wasn't part of the structure. She was just part of the assumption. This is our house, she said louder. You can't just... I can, I said.
Calm. Flat.
Final. Because I already had. The sheriff stepped forward. You need to gather your belongings, he said. You'll be escorted out. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, but complete. Because now, there was no version of this where they stayed. No, Mark said, but it didn't sound like resistance. It sounded like realization. This isn't happening, he added.
It was.
They just hadn't caught up yet. I walked past him, into the house. My house. The space hadn't changed. Not physically, but everything about it felt different. Because now, there was no confusion.
No assumption. No ilusión.
Just truth. His sister stood frozen in the hallway, still holding the edge of the robe like it belonged to her. I stepped closer, reached out, and gently pulled it from her hands. No force.
No struggle.
Because she didn't resist. She couldn't. Not anymore. You needed a place to stay, I said quietly. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Try somewhere else. Outside, I could hear movement, voices, the sound of things being carried,
Placed.
removed, exactly the way mine had been. Only this time, it wasn't temporary. I walked to the door, paused for a second, then looked at Mark one last time. He stood there, holding the papers, the reality finally settling into something he couldn't deny. You locked me out, I said, not angry, not emotional, just clear. Another pause, because now he remembered, and you were right. Silence, because he didn't understand. Not yet. This isn't your house, I finished. Another pause, longer, because now
He did.
I stepped inside, closed the door, and the deadbolt clicked. This time, it was mine.